One, people are so generous to bow as they come in. And if I bowed with everyone, I would be like a little bobbing thing in the car, constantly, constantly going. So save my bow to then. Before we begin our brief sitting, which we often do, I wanted to remind people of something that you may be quite familiar with. I'm going to screen share just for a second. If you go to the Appamada website, you'll see one of the pages is study. And on that page, if you scroll down a little bit, there are two versions of our chant book. Because some people have been asking about the chants, and we only do a few of them here. But you can you can actually print out the whole thing if you want from the PDF. And for example, when we do the verse of the robe or do the four practice principles, these are ones that we do typically. You can get all of those things off of the website if you'd like. So I just wanted to point that out to some folks because they have been asking about some of the things that we do. So let's enjoy a few moments of silence and stillness and presence with each other. as we return over and over again to silence and stillness. Returning to a silence that is not necessarily devoid of sound, or a stillness that's not necessarily the absence of movement or activity. But by being relatively silent and still, we give ourselves the opportunity to rest in the peaceful heart of mystery. And all the words, including the ones I'm saying now, are just an invitation back to the silence. And when I stop talking, that kind of silence doesn't quite actually touch the kind of silence that we return to. And all the activities we do coming online, even something we call sitting, doesn't quite touch the stillness that those everyday human embodied things guide us to. Maybe instead of saying we're now going to sit, maybe it's more accurate to say we're going to return to silence and stillness. A return to what's always, already our nature. With some spirit and some confidence in that return and how it shapes us as we go forward in our lives together. Just taking care of our posture in stillness, taking care of our breath in silence, and allowing awakening to take care of itself. And our return is more of a welcome rather than a withdrawal. Welcome an inhalation. We welcome the exhalation. We welcome everything as our life. Let's begin with the 4 practice principle. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Welcome, everyone. I recently, during this past week, was doing what I often do when I go on errands, whether I'm going to the store or to the landfill or the recycling center or all the exciting things one does on Molokai. And what I do is I listen to podcasts when I drive, and often Dharma talks, because it's one of the ways that I can be fed and encouraged, and also gives me ideas to be able to say the one thing that we can say in many different ways in these brief talks. And I was listening to a talk by one of the new people who's taken the position as abbot at San Francisco Zen Center. Jiryu Richmond Byler is his name. And the title of his talk was Coping with Our Problems, but he was reflecting on a quotation from Suzuki Roshi, and we just completed our retreat here, as you know, in Hawaii, where we focused on Zen mind, beginner's mind. And this was a quote that I wasn't quite so familiar with. Here's the piece that he was reflecting on. His comment was, if your everyday life is not based on this kind of spirit of repeating it forever, you cannot cope with the problems you have day after day. So this is out of some context, I know, but Suzuki Roshi's comment, if your everyday life is not based on this kind of spirit of repeating it forever, you cannot cope with the problems you will have day after day. This kind of spirit of repeating it forever. This kind of spirit of repeating it forever. uh, as I hear that, I think of our Zazen practice, of course, a continual practice, our way of turning toward the whole world in each moment and welcoming it, as I spoke about in sitting, and to share in the feeling that everything is extending itself to us. To share the feeling when people are coming on, to share the feeling of being alive with everything. And that he's saying that this is our practice forever. This is the spirit of repeating it forever. Returning to silence, returning to stillness. Forever? And the question that pops up for me, maybe for you, is like, am I up for this? Foreverness? Because this is the spirit that he's pointing to. And what's the... we always want something practical. What's the path for dealing with the suffering we'll have day after day? So I'm going to return to that, but this quote, which I'd not heard before, if your everyday life is not based on this kind of spirit of repeating it forever, you cannot cope with the problems you'll have day after day. I was reminded of a much more commonly used quotation from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, in the little chapter that's called Single-Minded Way. So I'm going to read just a brief little bit from that. He says the Bodhisattva's way is called the single-minded way, or one railway track thousands of miles long. The railway track is always the same. If it were to become wider or narrower, it would be disastrous. Wherever you go, the railway track is always the same. This is the Bodhisattva way. And here's the famous quote. So even if the sun were to rise in the west, the Bodhisattva has only one way. Even if the sun were to arise in the west, the Bodhisattva has only one way. Our way is in each moment to express our nature and our sincerity. And then he goes on, and I think it's important. I'm going to read this next section because I'll tell you why. He says, we say railway track, but actually there's no such thing. Sincerity itself is the railway track. The sights we see from the train will change. We're always running on the same track. And there's no beginning or end to the track. Beginningless and endless track. There's no starting point nor goal, nothing to attain. Just to run on the track is our way. This is the nature of our Zen practice. So to me, there's something very beautiful about this. And it would be a mistake, I think, to read Single-Minded Way as some fundamentalist, one true path you should believe. You can hear that, the single-minded way. And that's why it was important to continue with the second little paragraph where he says, we say railway track, but actually there's no such thing. It's an expression of this spirit of repeating, which in this case he calls sincerity. The spirit is sincerity. The railway track is sincerity. The one, even if the sun were to come up in the west, even if everything was turned upside down, even if the whole, there's only one way, which is caring for ourselves and each other, the Bodhisattva way. And he says, using the imagery, the scenery changes along the train, but the track doesn't change. What we see and what happens changes all the time. That's the nature of impermanence. But the Bodhisattva's way is to stay steady, not necessarily to feel steady, to continue to practice and repeating over and over. There's no starting point, no destination. It's beginningless and endless. Just moving along the track of practice is our lives. Just moving along, just breathing, just welcoming, returning to silence and stillness. One of the things that I've always appreciated, and in this Dharma talk I was listening to, Jiryu mentioned it also, the way he said it, he said, I've always admired Suzuki Roshi's bluntness. Because, it's not, to me, it's not unkind, and it's not aggressive. It's also not gratuitous. He's not showing off. He's encouraging us by saying something that on the first glance looks like really discouraging with his encouragement. There's a couple of really well-known ones you're both, all of you are familiar with. One of them is that one on the fourth day of Sesshin when everybody's like weary and don't know if they can go on. And he says in his Dharma talk that morning, the problems you're having now will continue for the rest of your life. And then he laughs. It's like, yeah, this is it. And another quotation, which you've heard, I know, where he says to his students, you're perfect just like you are. And you could use a little improvement. So each time he gives you a little reality check, actually. But it's not to be unkind or to be harsh. It's not, you're not being hit with the Zen stick, It's just, in psychological research, as a clinical psychologist, you have to sometimes read all this research about various things. And some of the social psychological research says, if you want to gain trust and have a deep, abiding kind of constant faith in relationships with people in a social setting, it's very important to be honest and admit things that are faulty or difficulties. Because if it always is positive, it's like, I don't know. But if you say, yeah, I've had that problem too, and there's something about that. And all of us have problems day after day, I think, right? And it's actually the first noble truth. When the Buddha says life is characterized by dukkha, he's saying we have problems day after day. And there's no end to the problems. All of us want to read the other three truths as, and then this is how you will solve your problems. So the first truth stands. Life is characterized by dukkha, whether you practice or whether you don't practice. And Lori brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned it last time too, about are we waiting? And oddly, our spiritual practice can be a form of waiting. Like, I'll do this so that, eventually, or maybe a better teacher will come along, someone who will say the things that actually I want to hear. Or new spiritual friends will come along, and together we'll form some special sangha that'll be the one where everything works well. Or, there's lots of waitings. But all the teachers say, this is the great matter. Life is passing. Don't waste time. The problem is life. The main reason you suffer is because you're alive. The Buddha did not say, if you practice well, you will have no problems. There's no way to be alive and not have problems. It's not a problem that we have a problem. It's not a sign that you're practicing incorrectly. What this attitude, which we all have, reveals is, I think it's kind of like a subtle loyalty to this illusion of separation that keeps us from practicing intimately with reality. Like, this is me, and then there are my problems over there that I'm working with. I'm working with the problems. And if I could solve them or get rid of them, and sometimes that's other people, then things would be okay and I wouldn't suffer sometime in the future. Do you think like this sometimes? It's not just me, right? So the students come to me. Well, let me say it a different way. But to get rid of them, the problems, would mean to get rid of your life. Because there isn't any them. The very life you are clinging to with the delusion that it could be problem free, that's the problem. There isn't some them separate. This is your life. And so people come to me, practice discussion. You come here to inquiry. And in some way or another, we communicate our concerns. And usually the assessment is, I know this is a little abridged, but the assessment comes to me like this. What is wrong with my practice? I still have problems. I must be doing something wrong. Because if I practiced right, then I wouldn't have these problems. I wish that's how it went. The path does lead to liberation. The Buddha is not like lying to us, and all the ancestors that came before us dedicated their lives to this practice. So once again, like Suzuki Roshi, I'm not trying to be discouraging when I'm being blunt. The path does lead to liberation, but you can't read it backwards. That no suffering would be evidence that you're accomplishing the path. The path leads us to liberation, but you can't change it around that, okay, I'm not suffering, therefore I'm suffering, so I must not be on the path, is how we usually read it. I'm suffering, so what am I doing wrong? But those are not the right questions. A better question is, how do I attend to this suffering, this life, our shared lives? How do I take care of it? How do I welcome it and take care of it? Because I'm going to have this for the rest of my life. I'm perfect just like I am, and I could use a little improvement, like returning to silence and stillness. Everything is fine, and then there's lived difficulty. So how do I attend to this suffering? How do I attend to this life that's full of problems? Our shared lives. Now we're back to Suzuki Roshi. It's through the spirit of repetition we take care of our problems. Even if the sun comes up in the west. In other words, even if the worst things happen, it's still our job. And without this spirit, and without this kind of sincerity, you can't actually manage being alive and be unburdened from the unnecessary suffering that we create by seeing the world in this way. And without this spirit and without this sincerity, you can't help others to release their burdens from unnecessary suffering. And this is the Bodhisattva way. But this is a point where I usually say, give me a break. Like, really? I'm going to have to do this again? I've been patient. I've been wise a few times. I've been compassionate. Like, again? And again? And again? So we cultivate this spirit of welcoming. A sincere spirit of welcoming. Come on, reality. You're going to ask of me at this again? I shouldn't have to deal with problems again. If these problems would just get out of the way, then I could enjoy and appreciate my life. If I just had the right partner, or if I just had the right teacher, or if I just had the right, name your list, the right house, the right cosmetic surgery, the right whatever it is, just enough money. Compassion is welcoming problems as my life. Compassion is welcoming problems as my life. And the inexhaustible nature of our Bodhisattva vow is what Suzuki Roshi is talking about when he talks about the Bodhisattva way. If your everyday life is not based on this kind of spirit of repeating it forever, you cannot cope with the problems you will have day after day. Even if the sun arises from the west, the Bodhisattva has only one way. Our way in each moment is to express our nature and our sincerity. There's a little sequence that Donna Martin had brought to my attention, and I've spoken about it in another inquiry, I think. It's a set of instructions by Patrul Rinpoche, a wonderful Tibetan teacher. These 4 things. He says, don't invite the future. Don't prolong the past. Don't fear appearances. Don't disturb your innate wakefulness. Don't invite the future. Take care of your life now, just as it is. Don't prolong the past. Take care of your life now, as it is. Don't fear appearances, all the things that arise. Just take care of your life now, as it is. Don't disturb your innate wakefulness, your true nature. Just take care of your life now, as it is. You have problems because you're alive. Your problems are evidence that you have been given a life. And you can do something about the problems if you let go of the idea that you should not have them, or that it's a mistake, or that you were a mistake or a failure for having them. If we look back at the Four Noble Truths again, life is characterized by dukkha, dissatisfaction, problems. It comes with the territory. You get issued a life, you get issued that. That's part of the deal. And then what is hard to realize, I think, is that the first noble truth and the fourth are the same thing. Think about it. The fourth noble truth is what? It's the Eightfold Path. So, right view, right intention, right speech, right action or conduct, it goes down the list. And this right doesn't mean right or wrong. It means in accord with life, taking care of our problems, taking care of our problems. So life is characterized by dukkha. Right view is taking care of our problems by seeing correctly. Right intention is having the right orientation. Right speech is actually, life is characterized by dukkha. That's what comes with the territory. And the fourth noble truth is, and this is how one is relieved of unnecessary suffering in a world that is full of those problems all the time. Not that if you do these things, you'll have no problems. It's our reactivity, number 2, that invite unnecessary suffering. And number 3, there's a way to contain and care for this reactive energy and all the inevitable problems we end. That's a whole nother talk, all this. But it's really interesting to think of the first one and the fourth one as actually the same thing, just looked at in a different way. Here, in our 4 practice principles, caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, right? So there's our problems. Caught in the self-centered dream, my problems. The fourth line, being just this moment, compassion's way. Compassion is welcoming the problems in my life as my life. The problem of being alive. The first one and the fourth one relate to each other. In the middle, we have holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Insisting on a personal solution, we hang on, waiting, hoping, wishing. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Okay, there's a way. That's taking care of the life you have. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. That's taking care of the life you have. If your everyday life is not based on this kind of spirit of repeating it forever, you cannot cope with the problems you'll have day after day. Even if the sun were to rise from the west, the Bodhisattva has only one way. So maybe this is discouraging, but it's the kind of encouragement that comes from facing reality, which we can do together. but maybe it brings out some questions or concerns or discernment around some of this that might be helpful for us to discuss. So please bring it forward. Um, and things that you're concerned about or that you challenge or it doesn't seem quite right or upsetting. Um, I'm happy to receive those things. All you have to do is raise your hand.
Yeah, Cassie.
There you go.
Um, I'm a little bit broken today.
Yeah.
Um, but I was just so struck by the welcoming your problems. I was just like, oh wow, that's a really big flip on, the way I associate with, the things I think are problems. I greatly appreciate that. And the metaphor of the train, and recently seen a video of a train going down a track and was able to kind of visualize all of that. But my dear friend Rick Rayburn passed away, and his funeral, yeah,
Yeah, I thought he would probably not live a long
make
time.
it, yeah. So
All right.
it was, it was about a month after his diagnosis of cancer before he dropped his body. And so at his funeral, one of my friends said, I'd like to go with you. And I just like, whoa, that really landed in me because, and so while we were sitting at our table of about, 8 people, somebody wanted Jay, his husband, to have a place to sit. So they put the chair next to me, which meant that the person that had come to support me was now a chair away. And then another friend wanted to come up and join that table and put a chair on the other side. And so now, and then Jay wasn't sitting there and the other person wasn't sitting there. So now I had empty spaces on both sides. And I really needed somebody to lean into. I needed somebody to be next to. And so I voiced it. And my friend said, no, that's for Jay. He'll come back. And I said, well, what about this chair? Can we move over this chair? And they said, no, this person, other people are going to come in and sit here. So 3 times I asked not to have vacant seats on each side of me and was told no each time. Mm-hmm. So when it was my turn to go up and speak at the microphone, when I came back, I just sat someplace different.
I was waiting for that one. Or just move you don't have to have somebody else solve the problem. Just move over.
Yeah. So,
sit where you want to sit.
It takes me a long time to move where I want to sit.
Yeah, and you did something really wonderful. You asked, you voiced. Because that's new also.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything wrong. You exhausted that way of attempting to solve the problem. And then finally it's like, oh yeah, I can move.
And I think that they were doing that because they on one side of the coin, I think that they wanted what I was going to offer to be available for those empty seats.
And you have to remember one other thing. Grief makes people crazy. And so, I'm being crude by the way I'm saying it that way. Is that when you're in the midst of all that, people are not in their right minds.
Yeah. I also found it interesting that like the first 2 people to speak were like employers, and it was kind of like a commercial. They were saying something about Rick, but I also were like promoting their business a tiny bit. And So, uh,
What'd you say?
uh,
The essence.
yeah. So, Rick had a joyful smile about him, and everybody had been talking about this exuberance that he had. So, I talked about when going over to their house that you knew that, he was going to greet you at the door with a smile. You knew that there was a smile on the other side of that door. But what really happened when you opened the door was that love was meeting you, that love was opening that door.
Yeah.
And
That door that he opened for you will always be open. And I would imagine you're one of the few people could match his exuberance.
thanks. Yeah, so like, even in saying that, I start, down that little self-judging path of maybe those chairs had to be there because people couldn't take in what I don't know.
I
I
don't think
just
it was
felt that
that
self-judgment
personal.
part come back.
I
I
don't think it's
didn't.
that personal. I think people are just swirling around in grief and trying to do things thinking they're being helpful, and just it gets confusing. And your job is to say, I want to go sit by my friend. I'm gonna go sit by my friend.
Yeah, right.
You just take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for coming forward. You're a great gift to all of us.
Thank you.
I think Becky may have had her hand up next. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Flint. Before I start, I'd like to just say so much of a thank you to Cassie for bringing that forward. And I found that I'd like to sing a song for myself, for her, for all of us in terms of grief in relationship to friends who've recently transitioned. So, no coming, no going, no after, no before. I hold you close to me. I release you to be so free. For you are in me, and I am in you. For you are in me, and I am in you. And the reason I came forward was that in your talking, I had a flash of something that I hadn't put there that clearly or received that clearly, which is that each of the times I've experienced a freedom that an awakening of any sort brings, then it's not attained. It is there that moment. I guess there was something in me that thought, oh, now I know how to be free from this thing or something. And so, and that I see each time I have something, that some little part of something is it's like, oh, that's a freedom from that, right? That I also at that moment have a flash of that there is so much more. But I always thought the more was always going to be different, deeper, broader, whatever. And it is often too. But and that was really freeing. So I thank you for that in what you were just talking about. And it's particularly lovely that it happened today for me, which was that I've recently been caught in a tangle that as many tangles do, they go out and catch old tangles and drag them into it, and they, find other dimensions to it, but they aren't, that it doesn't bring a solution, it just brings a bigger tangle, which is that I got pretty clear about a month or more than a month ago that what I needed to do next in my cancer treatment is to take a break from it and let my body be strong by the next time that I invite the chemo related treatment to, before I invite that into me again, that I needed to strengthen my body. I needed to strengthen that and have as much strength to do it as I could. And I was getting more and more depleted with bigger and bigger reactions. But I couldn't let myself absolutely make that as a decision until I could talk to an oncologist. And that took a huge long time before someone was able to respond to me. So it was only yesterday that I spoke with the oncologist and woke up really clear about a whole lot of aspects of all of that this morning. So I went, oh wow, it's, and I realized that in choosing to do what they felt was best, I had to turn something over to them.
Mhm.
But that also in that process, as my body felt less and less capable to take that in and do something good with it, that I started feeling like a victim to it.
Mhm.
And that's not the way I want my body and mind to go with the idea of healing. So anyway, it really, what all you were saying today, right, landed very well in me today. And I just am
And
appreciative.
this last bit that you're saying, I think, is really a good distinction between wholesome surrender, something that, and unwholesome submission. Those are different things. And that distinction is what wakes up, it gives you more space. And thank you for the song. It was so beautiful.
It's from the Palm Village tradition,
That's what I
and it's
thought.
been really useful to me through the many deaths and so on that have been around me recently. So I
Thank
wanted to
you.
share.
And I hope that your break or will give you much more energy.
We have Suzanne.
Quite a theme this morning, huh, Suzanne?
We really have, Flint. I was really touched by Becky's song. That was very
I thought you would
um,
be.
near to my heart. Yes. Um, I listened to what you said, Flint, through the lens of what we talked about on Sunday at meditation from the perspective of practice edges. And I invited people to speak about them, knowing that it could be kind of risky because it's acknowledging something. What happened was, as we talked about it, we started laughing and became not of course not laughing at each other, but laughing with some delight in the discovery that we're not alone. And
Yeah.
of course, when problems are shared, problems are halved or more, we go, oh, this isn't such a big deal, or yeah, it's life. Okay. So I just was really struck with that. And then this morning I read, I was reading, I'm reading Beginner's Mind Again, stimulated by the retreat. And the quote I read from Suzuki Roshi that stuck with me is that if you lose your spirit of repetition, this is all going to be very difficult.
Yes.
Yes.
Similar quote.
Yes, yes. And that's really true. If we aren't willing to, meet our edges
Mhm.
and
And just keep going on the railway track.
exactly, because everything we pass is all scenery, as he says, it's all scenery. When we think about our lives as scenery, that adds another little delightful feel to it.
Yes,
That doesn't mean we don't have serious things happen or we're not faced with serious things.
of course. Of course.
We are. But sharing them is so important. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm so grateful for inquiry here.
And that which opens the space that opens of the silence and stillness that we return to as we're sharing and as we're meeting these
Mhm.
problems. It's the universal aspect. It isn't very personal. The problems,
Yeah,
as Cassie said, the problems break us. Sure, that's true. That isn't
yeah.
one way, but it doesn't break the silence and the stillness,
Mhm,
which is all health.
mhm,
And
mhm,
those two ways of looking are a lot of what our practice helps us do, but only through that spirit of continuing over time.
mhm,
If
mhm,
we only
mhm.
practice when we feel like it or we feel good, we begin to attach to the practice that's going to make us feel good or encourage us.
And we hold on to a gaining idea about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Thank
you so much, Flint. Thanks for your
you.
teaching.
And thanks for
Thanks
your
to all of everybody here. It's so good to see you all. Take care.
thanks for your continuous practice over the years, which has led you to this place where you're supporting
Mhm,
us.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
I can't remember what we were looking at the other day. Aaron and I were going through some things, and he realized in a way that he hadn't, I guess, quite clearly. It's like Cassie's been around that long. We were talking about continuous practice, and I said, "Yeah, it's from the very beginning. 20, however long it is. But many of you are in that way. 22 years. And the number of years doesn't really matter, but it's the spirit of continuation."
Annalta.
So that. Pardon me.
Hi, Flint. Hi, everyone.
I know
Um,
that.
Thank you for this talk. Yeah, I just want to say that whether it exists or not, I love the synchronicity of the cosmos because things come together and start fitting together like puzzle pieces. And so I'll share the things that came together, starting with depth in practice last night. Kim Mosley shared a little, very short 2-minute video of a talk he had heard by, I have to look at the name,
Huh?
Shihaku Okumuru, who
Huh?
gave who gave this talk at the Austin Zen Center, and it's entitled Buddha Nature, Thief Nature, and essentially saying that one or the other, or sometimes flipping back and forth several times, exist in us. There's either that Buddha nature of releasing to what is, or there's that thief nature of attaching to this or that, wanting, aversion. And so this morning in my sit, I thought, oh, why don't I look at life that way? As either a bodhisattva or a dharma gate.
Mhm.
So everything's just either something of abundance that's being handed to me as a gift. And so that's the bodhisattva, or something like this aching hip, as I try to sit here,
Mhm.
is a dharma gate.
Mhm.
And that seemed in my heart, that just seemed to tie into this Buddha nature, thief nature, that we can take everything and see how everything is practice. Everything can either be a gift from some bodhisattva in our universe or a dharma gate for us to walk through. And then you gave this talk today about all of it is your life, all of it. You can't cut out pieces here and there and say, oh no, this is the package I want. This is your life, so take all of it. So I hope everyone will, in their own way, have the joy and pleasure I've felt from looking at everything as a bodhisattva gift or a dharma gate. So thank you for your talk.
That's great because it is the practice turn. Because if we just look at their problems that we have, we want to get them solved and cope. That's, helpful in some ways, but that's not the practice says, okay, everything is an opportunity, not like woohoo. Sometimes there are opportunities we don't want, but it's a dharma gate rather than it's just another damn problem. So that's great, Nilda. It's a great and good to reflect on and to say because it helps us remember. So thank you for that.
Thank you for you and for life and for all of you on screen and elsewhere.
Yes.
Lynn.
Welcome, Lynn.
That's serendipity and synchronicity, how things come together, which I just keep. It's happening all the time, doesn't it? And I wrote something this last week, which it's quite short, so I just wanted to share it, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
You will know that I love Morecambe Bay, that stretch of sand that goes on forever. And I was there fairly recently, and this is what arrived.
From
So,
when you were at Morecambe?
yeah.
Uh-huh.
The path is not visible. Each time it has to be discovered, divined, just using this body, these hands, these eyes, these feet. It only exists in the walking of it. We are the living form, we are its presence. Although it's been trodden for centuries, we are the living embodiment, wherever we are. Here, just this, its current expression. Here is the place, here the way unfolds. There is no other. If no one walks the path, will there be a path? It takes courage to meet our suffering, so much courage to meet our life raw and unadorned. Shall we turn away? Shall we say, no, not this, not now? Or shall we meet it all with the whole of this, with open hands, with its raw and unadorned face, with this practice of respect for what we have, sitting up with a straight, strong back, a soft front, breathing, just breathing, taking care with how we place our feet in the zendo, in the world, in our lives, and with each other, together in this aliveness.
That's beautiful. Would you mind sharing it with me?
I'd be honored.
Great. I often use these things because they're so well. It's beautiful and it's intimate and it comes from all of you who you may be called students, but you're teachers also. And we're toward the end of our time, but I'm going to screen share a very short poem, and I want you to read it out loud. Okay? Because it's a conversation you're having with a very famous poet, Tony Machado.
Traveller, Your Footprints by Anthony Machado. Traveller, your footprints are the only road, nothing else. Traveller, there is no road. You make your own path as you walk. As you walk, you make your own road. And when you look back, you see the path you will never travel again. Traveller, there is no road, only a ship's wake on the sea.
Were you familiar with that poem?
No,
I was not. Joel brought it to my attention recently, and then you were reading this, and it's like, oh my goodness, there's a conversation here. So thank you for that, and I look forward to sitting with your poem again.
thank you.
And I see that we're just a bit over time, so what I want to say is there's a dedication we sometimes use at the end of service, a brief one, that says, may our intention equally permeate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. And so you won't be able to hear, but look, so say this line after me. May our intentions equally permeate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Flint. Thank you, and thank you, everybody. And as you all know, Appamada's programs and facilities are supported by all of you and all your offerings. So if you would like to make an offering, please do go to appamada.org/contribute, and you'll see a place there to offer dana to Flint and to any of Appamada's programs and facilities. And there'll be a box to put in what you want your donation for. So thank you all so much. And if you'd like to continue for a further 30 minutes with myself and others, please do just pop yourself into gallery view and I'll join you in a couple of minutes. Well, a couple of moments, actually. Right, thank you so much. Thank you.